This week on Motoring 90.
I'd like to do an IndyCar race this year. I need to find the funding right now to do it. And that's the biggest part. I think I could do really well.
Yes, freedom. Freedom. Yay, independent living. It's very important. I'm able to work where I couldn't work before.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 90. Not bad, eh? Believe me, it's a labor of love. But later on we're going to discover that this pink bombshell can also be a source of considerable stress for its proud owner. We'll tell you more about that later on. But first, we're going to join Steve Grant. He has a story about a young Canadian who could possibly be a future superstar, at least on the racetrack.
He may not look like the stereotypical race car driver, but you're looking at one of the brightest stars on the horizon. Paul Tracy will turn 22 this year, but already his resume is lined with victories. He runs on the ARS circuit, and so far this year he's dominated, winning the first two races easily. But like a lot of open-wheeled racers in North America, Paul has a dream.
I'd like to do an IndyCar race this year. I need to find the funding right now to do it. And that's the biggest part. I think I could do really well, but I haven't got the funding right now to do it. But I'm trying to look for some to do a race by the end of the season.
In between the flashes of brilliance, there's been disappointment. In 1988, he won at Phoenix. The rest of the season was marred by mechanical failure. In '89, again, frustration. This year, he's with Lanford Racing, and so far, so good.
Well, I'm driving it as hard as I always was. It's just I have the confidence with the team there and the car. I know it's not going to fall apart on me, so I can drive it really hard and not worry about it. Whereas before, I'd be driving around and I'd always have something in the back of my mind saying, watch out, something might break. Or just when you have a continual letdowns over a constant amount of races, and it just sits in the back of your mind how something's going to break. So you try to take it a little bit easy. But this year I've got the confidence with the team, and I just drive as hard as I want. Well, I like the road courses better. I think Phoenix is one of those places where I've won my first time there, and I just enjoy the place. And every time I go there, no matter what I'm driving or what the car's like, I can seem to go quick there because I like the place so much. But I like the road courses a lot better than the ovals.
Ralph Van Diemen obviously has confidence in Tracy. The British car maker has hired Paul to test a brand new Formula 2000. The car is literally right out of the box, but Ralph doesn't seem too worried.
He's tested cars for us in England, and he stayed with us in England for a while at my house. And I really do rate Paul, and there's not that many drivers, young drivers, that one can say that about. I personally have dealt with young drivers for a long time. Quite a name for that. Ayrton Senna is just one of the drivers that started with me in England.
What's first impression? This feels pretty good. An oversteer, the fast corners. Going up over four at oversteers, I guess because there's such a wide band of rubber there from different lines.
Put a bit of wing on.
Do you feel it when you go over four? Do you feel it drop?
Coming up the back straightaway, the front end touches.
Oh, does it?
Over the hill.
No kidding. Really?
I do see a bright future, and I've always maintained that from the time I watched him drive, he was quite immature at that time. Since then, he's matured tremendously, and he's a nice character. And I see that Paul will be one of the drivers that makes it with or without money.
Like I said, right now I don't really have a sponsor right now besides Lanford is helping me out, and my father puts up pretty well all the money. So right now we're looking for a sponsor to move on to do something next year. I'm pretty set for this year.
In round figures, how much are we talking? What does it cost to support someone like yourself?
Per race, I think the average is from about $80,000 to $100,000 with a competitive team.
Is it frustrating that you know you can drive one of these cars and that unfortunately you have to buy a ride? In other words, it's not just skill that gets you in there.
Yeah, it is frustrating, but a lot of people look. I think the last couple of years in ARS, you've had guys like Mike Groff who've been really oval specialists and weren't that good on the road courses and street courses, and guys like Tommy Byrne that were good on street courses but not good on ovals. So I think I've got a bit of an advantage in getting a good ride because I can win on the ovals and the street courses and road courses.
In the meantime, Paul has his fingers crossed, hoping that someone picks him up for the Toronto and Vancouver Indies. One thing is for sure, he won't be watching them on television.
I don't really watch a lot of races on TV. I don't get mad, but I just kind of sit there and I go, I should be there. And so I don't really watch a lot of races on TV, but I enjoy watching the stock car races because those guys are they're incredible. Some of the stuff they do in the stock cars, how close they run to each other. But to watch my other series and stuff like that in Formula cars, I can watch it, but I'm not really a fan. I can sit there and just watch the whole thing through. I just think about, well, if I was there, maybe I could be doing as good as them.
You've probably gassed up many a Chevy where you drop the license plate to get to the cap. Well, stay tuned. On Test Drive, we look at a Chevy that will certainly surprise you.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the 1991 Chevrolet Caprice Classic. As you can see, the body has been radically restyled, but beneath this new facade lurks all of the traditional technology that made the Caprice name what it is today. Now, this is a full-size V8 engine, and it's dwarfed in the engine compartment, which gives you a good idea of just how large this car actually is. The North American Forte has always been a traditional full-size rear-wheel drive vehicle with a V8 engine. The new Chev Caprice fits this description to a T. Under the hood is a 5-litre V8 engine that produces 170 horsepower. It is matched to a 4-speed automatic transmission. In the acceleration test, we required a little over 11 seconds to reach 100 kilometers an hour. All things considered, this level of performance is more than acceptable. In the pylon test, the Caprice put on a reasonable show. Interestingly, the limiting factor here was more to do with the total lack of lateral support offered by the seats than it was to do with the suspension. On the open road, however, the large seats do provide superb comfort, and the suspension does a good job of isolating the occupants from the rigors of a rough road. The range of comments received on the Caprice's new body style ranged from polite interest through to 2 thumbs down. The most interesting comment came from the cameraman, who said the car looked like an unfinished artist's conception of a vehicle in the prototype stage. Personally, with the exception of the treatment around the rear wheels, I quite like the overall effect. Now, can you imagine this car decked out in full police regalia? At the moment, this may seem far-fetched, but when you consider that the Caprice has long been the staple diet of police forces throughout North America, it is not beyond the realms of possibility and is rather intriguing, to say the least. Aside from the appearance, the only other major changes are the addition of a driver's side airbag and a Bosch 2 anti-lock brake system, both of which significantly improve vehicle safety. During the brake test, the ABS system stopped this heavy car from 80 kilometers an hour in just 112 feet. The absence of any brake pedal pulsation when the system is activated eliminates the driver apprehension associated with the older type systems. The dash layout is plain and simple, featuring a large analog speedometer, fuel and temperature gauges. The remainder of the systems are monitored by large warning lights, which on a vehicle of this type is not a bad thing. I also like the way all the controls for the power options are conveniently grouped together. On the downside, the horn buttons are tiny, and so I sometimes found myself pounding the airbag instead of expressing my displeasure at the motorist that just cut me off. Despite the trunk's enormous size, the spare tyre location and unusual contours deprive you of much of the usual space. On the subject of the trunk, the Caprice features a remote control to unlock the doors and open the trunk. Someone was obviously thinking here, because it will only function with the car in park, which is a very sensible idea. A couple of other items worthy of mention are the compass mounted in the rearview mirror and a coin and cup holder that pulls out from above the ashtray. The only problem is you cannot use the ashtray if you use the cup holder. Before we go to the scoreboard, it's time for my pet peeve with the Caprice Classic, and it is to do with this left side door mirror. It's far too small for a vehicle of this size, meaning there's a nasty blind spot over your left-hand shoulder. Now to the scoreboard for the ratings of the 1991 Chevy Caprice Classic. There never has been a true substitute for cubic inches when it comes to engine size, and so despite the 11-second time, the 5-litre V8 hauls the Caprice to the 100k mark with a minimum of fuss and makes highway cruising a pleasure. The suspension system is anything but sophisticated. However, it offers superb ride comfort and it handled the pylon test relatively well. Only the lack of any real lateral support from the seats hindered things. Another superb showing from the Bosch 2 anti-lock brake system, and so another equally high score for that performance. There was virtually no engine noise evident and only a very minimum amount of wind noise, giving the Caprice a very serene environment. At an average of 24 miles per gallon or 11.7 litres per 100 kilometres, the days of the Caprice being known as a gas guzzler are gone. Be warned though, it still gets thirsty around town with the air conditioner switched on. The futuristic styling atop a traditional rear-wheel drive platform should ensure the Caprice a healthy sales rate. It also provides a very affordable and very welcome alternative to the Caddies and Lincolns of this world.
And the next time you turn the steering wheel, it snaps in to one of the grooves in the lock plate. Now the steering column is locked because the lock plate is splined to the shaft just like the steering wheel was. You can't turn the steering wheel in this vehicle now.
We're back here now with our pink Bombshell, and joining me is the proud owner, Paul Basil. Paul, come on over here and tell us and our viewers all about this car, because I know you're real proud of it.
It's an all-original 1934 all-steel 3-window coupe. It's been chopped approximately 6 inches. It's been a little bit pro-streeted in the rear. It's got the original 34 outer frame, which has been boxed and reinforced with crown moly tubing and a 4-link suspension. It's completely high-tech, the car. It's all electronic devices in the car, which activates all the features in the car, which is windows, trunk, sunroof, front windshield, trunk, etc.
Now, you tell me it can be very stressful owning an automobile like this. First of all, tell me how much it's worth and tell me about the stress you undergo sometimes.
It's worth approximately $100,000, the appraised value. The stress I go with the car is constant. You have to constantly watch the weather reports when driving the car. A few times I was caught in rain and had to dodge into people's garages, and otherwise it's a very streetable and a lot of fun to drive.
Now, do you do all your own mechanical work?
Oh, the car was assembled by myself and a few friends, and it was a lot of work, 4.5 years of it, but it was worth it in the end.
All right, well, obviously you don't need the services of our chief mechanic, and of course I'm talking about Bill Gardiner, and I'm sure Bill would love to work on this baby, but let's join Bill in his garage and see what he's up to this week.
All the time that you're driving, you've got your hands on the steering column, but you may not realize how much is going on inside that steering column. There's a lot of safety features and controls that all come together in the steering column. This week we're going to pull one apart so you can have a look at just how it works and identify a few of the most common problems. We're using this 85 GM minivan. This particular one comes apart pretty easily. We can already see our first problem. The horn wire is broken away from its contact down here. So we'll set the horn hub aside. We can already see our first safety feature. That's this snap ring here that prevents this large nut retaining the steering wheel from ever coming off. If it should ever loosen, it could never come off the shaft because of this safety ring here, this snap ring. So we'll open it up and set that aside for reinstallation later. We can also see a couple of score marks here, one in the center of the steering shaft and one on the steering wheel down there just underneath the nut. We have to take note of those score marks because the wheel has to go back on with those two marks aligned, or the wheel would be offset left or right if we didn't have those lined up. The next thing to do is loosen the steering stem nut and spin it off. You can see a couple of threaded holes under here that we're going to use for the steering wheel puller to remove this wheel. We've also taken out a couple of Phillips screws in here just to speed things up. I'll take the third one out and that'll remove the horn ring for us. We'll set that aside. There's the other half of that contact for the horn. There should be a little contact in here and a piece of wire that's broken off and missing, so that's something we'll have to repair. Now the steering wheel is splined to the steering shaft, and it's also on a taper, so as the nut tightens down, it locks into position, so that's why we need the puller to remove it. Now when you turn the ignition key off in your vehicle, there's a little rod in here that comes up against the lock plate. It's spring-loaded, and the next time you turn the steering wheel, it snaps in to one of the grooves in the lock plate. Now the steering column is locked because the lock plate is splined to the shaft just like the steering wheel was. You can't turn the steering wheel in this vehicle now. Now the lock plate remover is holding the plate depressed against that heavy spring behind it so that we can dig this snap ring out that holds the lock plate on. Now that we've dug that out of its groove, we can remove the lock plate and the puller together. The puller threads off the steering shaft, and there's the lock ring. We'll have to dig that out as well. It's caught a little bit. Set it aside. Now we can remove the lock plate. You can see where it's splined to the shaft, and we'll remove the horn slip ring. Oh my, gee, this is really a mess. This slip ring is supposed to be a nice flat little plate sitting on the back of this plastic piece, and it's completely destroyed. It should be nice and flat and smooth like you see there all the way around. It's just wrecked. And we can see an awful lot of damage in here. I just can't believe what's happened in here. That used to be a spring that was shaped like that. That little copper contact used to be in this hole, and that's part of the horn contact circuit. Here's a little spring bar that's part of the turn signal switch over here, and it's broken and come completely out. This vehicle is going to have a new turn signal switch. Now down at the base of the steering column we have this saddle-shaped clamp. I've already loosened the two nuts that hold it to the body of the vehicle, and I'll slide those off. And I'm going to remove the bolts that secure this saddle clamp to the steering column. Now I can remove this clamp. There's 4 bolts holding it to the column and 2 studs holding the bracket to the car. Now you can see this saddle clamp is an interesting piece. It's got another safety feature incorporated in it. It's mounted here to the vehicle and here to the steering column of the car. If you're in a frontal collision, this aluminum piece can slide out of the steel bracket and allow the steering column to submarine or move away from you. Now all that damage that we saw earlier in the top of the column and all those small broken parts in there are not normal wear and tear. Somebody had this column apart, didn't put it back together right, and that could have caused a severe problem. As you can see, you need some special tools, some pullers. You need to know what you're doing, so don't try this yourself. It's a job for a professional mechanic. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 90.
The action of this particular hand control is right angle and towards you for gas or acceleration. There's a spring in there, you can feel that, and then come up and forward for braking.
You know, I remember when I was 16 years old, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. I remember sweating through the driving test, and then the euphoria of actually passing. Now I just take driving for granted, and not everyone's quite as fortunate as I am. That's where the Hugh McMillan Center comes in.
Ahmed, tell me how you heard about our assessment service.
Well, I was referred to the Hugh McMillan Center by the MS Society, because I have multiple sclerosis. And
Margaret Young is Director of Driver Education at the Hugh McMillan Center. It's a program that retrains drivers recently disabled or gets new drivers into a car for the very first time.
In the driving program, everyone starts by having an assessment, such as Ahmed had today, and we're trying to determine either their potential to drive for the first time or again after some kind of an accident or an illness. So we do teach first-time drivers, and we have no age limits, so we see people from 16 to perhaps 60, but we see a lot of young people with polio, with cerebral palsy, spina bifida, amputations, rheumatoid arthritis, anything that might alter their physical status.
sometimes I can walk just fine and I can move my feet just fine, but sometimes it's like wearing rubber boots walking through mud. And so I can't rely on my feet to react.
Ahmed, what I'd like to do is to do a visual screening, just test your eyes, which will be day vision, peripheral vision, night vision, distance judgment. And then I'd like to introduce you to the reaction time machine, which has hand controls.
It got to the point where I knew that I was going to have to start driving again, because I used to drive, then I stopped driving because I didn't like cars or the idea of them. But then it got to the point where if I was going to continue living independently, I was going to have to start driving again and actually get a car.
Okay, what I need to do, Ahmed, is just check your peripheral vision and see how far you see on either side. And I would like you to look at my thumb. I'm going to move these orange-colored dots like this and like this on the other side. And you just say now when you see something moving.
Okay.
Okay, whenever you're ready, I'll go. I think we've learned never to take something at face value and to really give everyone a chance behind the wheel. Okay, Ahmed, I'm going to introduce you now to the action of hand controls. They're always on the left, or nearly always on the left, and the action of this particular hand control is right angle and towards you for gas or acceleration. There's a spring in there, you can feel that, and then come up and forward for braking. You can't hurt anything, so just try it. Gas, and up and forward for brake. Good. Now the way you can remember forward is braking is that if you were ever rear-ended, which I hope that will never happen, the natural action of your body would be forward and you'd want the brake to come on. That's good. This is the horn button and the dimmer switch, which isn't hooked up here. And this little exercise that we're going to go through, you and I will turn the machine on together. When I push a button here and you have your hand on the gas, the green light will come on. He's the good guy. He's the one you want on most of the time. If this white light comes on, you turn left, the light will go out and back to the middle. If this white, you turn right, and if the red light comes on, that's the only time you need to brake.
Okay.
Okay? So we're going to have a practice session first. Take a big breath. Hand on the gas, and away we go.
The indoor simulations definitely provide a valuable service, but they're just that. They're simulations. The next step now is to get out behind the wheel of the car with an instructor. Now, the rules of the road are the same. It's just the controls are slightly different.
Hi, Ahmed. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Now, today is the day where you get familiar with this
All right.
hand control.
Yep.
Okay. You always feel lost at first that you can't use your feet, you know. But then it is just a matter of some people take like duck to water to the use of the hand controls, and others have a very hard time coordinating the rotation on the steering wheel with the right angle motion on the hand control. You have to realize that to drive with hand controls is no drawback, because if you take the four extremities, the hand is always faster than the foot will ever be. Matter of fact, it's usually a 20th of a 100-second faster, the hand over the foot. The most rewarding thing to see for us is that people overcome tremendous obstacles, and it's time and again that our clients prove to you that it's worthwhile believing in people's ability to overcome obstacles.
Yes, freedom. Freedom. Yay, independent living.
Well, that is it for this week. We want to thank Paul Basil for giving us a nice look here at his beautifully restored 1934 Ford Coupe. Next week, we are going to be in Sweden. Make sure you join us. Till then, I'm Brad Diamond. Have a great week. And now we're going to hit it. Watch this.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
About 30 seconds, Tony. Yeah, what do we need? LNG, frags. What do we need? I think that's a 5:30 second. If you start